For the past decade, Everest has witnessed a staggering increase in the number of death tolls in each climbing season. And even though many of these deaths are a result of poor decision-making and selfish ambition, some veteran climbers have also died on the mountain in some of the most heartbreaking and unnecessary ways. Amongst them are the unsung heroes of mountain climbing, the Sherpas. For years, Sherpas have lived their lives in servitude of the great mountains, guiding and helping other climbers to achieve their lifelong dream of reaching some of the world's highest peaks. One of them is the famous Babu Chiri Sherpa. Babu Chiri was a legendary Sherpa in the Himalayan climbing community. His career as a climber began at the age of 16, when he got a job as a porter, transporting climbing gear and other supplies between camps. At the age of 25, Babu made his first ascent on Everest. He would go on to summit the mountain 10 more times, all while achieving a number of unprecedented feats. Babu holds the record for the first person to summit Everest twice in the same month without supplemental oxygen. During his first expedition that month, Babu broke the record of longest stay on the world's highest peak by camping on the summit for 21 hours, a record that is yet to be broken till date. A few days after returning to base camp, Babu made another complete ascent on Everest that same month. Now, for those who have no business climbing Everest, this might seem like a not-so-big deal. However, many mountain climbers have talked about the physical and mental exhaustion most climbers experience after returning to base camp. Some even have to spend weeks or months recuperating their lost energy, but this was not the case for Babu. The following year, he upped his game and made history as the fastest mountain climber on Everest, having climbed from base camp to summit in just 16 hours. Babu was a legendary climber and excellent guide, not just on Everest, but also among the Himalayan climbing community. At just 35, he had built his reputation as one of the most popular Sherpas in the world, and was known as a fine gentleman by those who interacted with him. In April 2001, Babu led an expedition to what was going to be his 11th summit on Everest. Around 4 p.m. that evening, the team arrived at Camp 2, where they set up for the night. Babu was seen walking around the area, taking photographs. Unfortunately, this would lead to a fatal accident that would cause him to fall into one of the many deep crevasses on Everest. But his absence would be noticed by others until around 9 p.m. during dinner time. Immediately, a search team was sent to look for him, and it wasn't until around midnight that they finally traced his footprints to a hole that looked like someone had fallen into it. There, they found Babu knocked unconscious in the dark hole. Apparently, fresh snow had covered the opening of a large crevasse that was about 200 meters deep, and Babu, deceived by the snow, had mistakenly stepped on it and fallen into the crevasse. His death dealt a huge blow on the Himalayan climbing community, and condolences poured in from different parts of the world. The Prime Minister of Nepal and other dignitaries flew in to the Sherpa Center in Kathmandu to pay their last respects to his recovered body. Having had no formal education himself, Babu's lifelong dream was to construct a school in his small isolated village of Taksindu and give the children the education he never enjoyed. And to preserve his legacy, a school was constructed in his home village by the Nepalese government and other non-profit organizations. His school, Babu Chiri Bal Kalyan Primary School, is now run by the Nepalese government to preserve his legacy. Babu Chiri's story is one of the many untold stories of Sherpas who lived and gave their life in servitude of some of Everest, the goddess mother of the world. The death of Dan and Pastanji Sherpa remains one of the most unfortunate and avoidable tragedies that has ever happened on Everest. The two were experienced climbers and would even achieve their goal of reaching Everest's summit. But what happened afterwards is a sad reminder of the dangers of overcrowding and how climate change was fast affecting the mountain. 39-year-old Daniel Patterson was a British fitness trainer and influencer in the UK. His guide, Pastanji Sherpa, was an ambitious 23-year-old who had summited Everest, K2, and several 6,000-meter peaks on multiple occasions. Their journey to the summit started around 1 a.m. on the 21st of May, 2024. From Camp 4, the two began the arduous climb to the summit. At 8,000 meters, the men were now officially in the death zone. Because of the climate change, Everest was experiencing fewer days of good climbing weather, limiting climbers to just a few days of good weather. Over the years, the short weather window had caused a major increase in overcrowding on Everest, and 2024 was no different. As they climbed further up the mountain, Dan and Pastenji Sherpa soon found themselves in a long line of mountaineers who were also trying to utilize the short weather window opportunity. Leading all the way up the summit was a long line of climbers neck to neck with backpacks in the faces of people behind them. What made the situation even more dangerous was the fact that they were now in the death zone, where many climbers were often affected by the thin air, aka reduced atmospheric pressure. Dan and Pastenji Sherpa took one step after another before finally making it to the summit around 4:30 a.m. After a few minutes of taking photographs, the duo began their descent down the mountain. But the route down was even more crowded than it was on their way up. An even longer queue had formed, and on it was a two-way traffic of climbers trying to get to the summit and some making their descent on that same narrow path. The only thing holding people from falling were the safety ropes that had been firmly anchored into solid parts of the mountain. But this caused another bottleneck on the slopes, especially with fatigued climbers slowing the people behind them. Time was too precious to waste on Everest, and to bypass the gridlock, many climbers would unclip themselves from the safety ropes and then make their way around the slow climbers before immediately reclipping themselves back to the ropes. It was a risky maneuver, but it was a choice they had to make to get past the slow, fatigued climbers in front of them. Inch after inch, Dan and Pastenji Sherpa made their way down Hillary Step, but this was where disaster was waiting to happen. As they approached Hillary Step, a piece of frozen snow and ice which had borne the weight of thousands of climbers that traversed the same route suddenly collapsed off the edge, dragging 4 climbers down the side of the mountain. 2 of the climbers were still attached to the safety ropes and were able to be rescued. But Dan and Pastenji Sherpa were not so lucky. The cornice collapsed just when they had unclipped themselves from the rope, and in a matter of seconds the 2 men were sent tumbling down the Tibetan side of the mountain. The next day, search efforts were made to retrieve their bodies, but they had fallen from one of the most treacherous side of Everest, and the chances of recovering their bodies grew slimmer as the days passed. A GoFundMe was created by Dan's girlfriend to fund aerial searches for him from helicopters, but all their efforts were futile. Their deaths reignited criticisms about the commercialization of Everest and how the increasing crowds as well as climate change were affecting age-long parts of the mountain. But Dan and Pastenji were only one of the many fatalities on Everest. On May 16, 2006, another young adventurer and extreme skier would be one of Everest's many victims. Thomas Olsson was a Swedish skier and adventurer. At only 30, he had successfully summited Everest as well as several other peaks. He had even participated in skiing down some of the world's highest and steepest mountains. And with more people trying for a unique first on the world's tallest peak, Tomas also decided to add a new record to his list of achievements. Not only was he going to reach summit Everest for the second time, Tomas wanted to ski down the mountain's north face. This side of the mountain was considered to be much more technical than the usual climbing route on Everest, but Tomas was willing to do what no one had attempted. In 2006, he partnered with Tormod Granheim, an equally ambitious skier from Norway, and the duo started to prepare for their record-breaking feat. On the 16th of May, Tomas and Tormod reached Everest's summit from the Mallory route in just 2 days, a route that normally took climbers 5 days to complete. From there, they set off on their skis down Everest's north face. Unfortunately for them, after only skiing about 460, 1,500 feet, down the north face, Tomas's left ski broke, causing a major attack in their plan. A broken ski would have been easily managed or replaced on normal ground, but on Everest, it was a recipe for disaster. Not only were they the only ones skiing Everest at that height, they were also doing it on one of the most difficult and less climbed routes on the mountain. So there were little chances of them getting any help or replacement from other climbers. Aware of their situation, Tomas and his partner tried to fix the ski with duct tape and climbing gear, but the repair did not hold for long. They were left with no choice than to make an abseil, but finding a strong anchor for their rope was another challenge. The rock was too hard to cut into, and the ice was frozen solid. Eventually, they were able to improvise, using 2 snow skis and an ice axe to anchor the rope. It wasn't a solid anchor, but they were hopeful that it would serve them until it was no longer needed. With that, Tomas descended first, but about 30 meters down, the anchor broke, sending Tomas tumbling down the great couloir. Tormod tried helplessly to secure the rope, but it was a futile attempt. Not only did he have to witness the horror of his partner falling to his death, his oxygen mask had broken while struggling to secure the rope. And without supplemental oxygen in the death zone, he knew his time was limited. With the loss of his partner still weighing heavily on him, Tormod managed to ski down the mountain yelling and calling out Tomas's name, with hopes that he had miraculously survived the fall. But his voice was only echoed and carried back to him on the cold mountain. Defeatedly, Tormod made his way down to camp where he reported the situation. A group of Sherpas, along with Tomas's colleagues from the Swedish Everest ski expedition, scoured the clear face of the mountain where they found Tomas's frozen body at 6,700 meters. His family was contacted, and a helicopter was arranged to airlift his body from the mountain. Tomas's fall on the mountain was tragic. He was an experienced and highly accomplished skier, and if his Everest attempt had been successful, he would have went on to ski Mount Vinson in Antarctica as part of his lifelong dream to ski the 7 highest peaks in each continent. Thank you for watching.
For the past decade,
do like, comment, and subscribe for more videos.